elementary schoolers. How did God create space?
By simply creating other things that would go into it. I'm assuming or if you mean like space out there, I believe in the Big Bang Theory, but I think again the Big Bang Theory was actually started by God, so God put everything in place to make the Big Bang happen, and we went from there.
When you go to heaven, can you actually see Jesus?
Yes.
What is the meaning of life?
Following Jesus.
Does God have any pets?
Mrs. Hanaway.
I would say no, because God does not look at his creation the same way we kind of look at creation. So God doesn't really have a sense of ownership of things. He's in relationship with everything in its own particular way.
Where is the Garden of Eden? Is it an actual place we could visit?
I'll be honest, I don't know.
Did St. Francis have any friends?
Yes, he had a lot of friends actually, and many of them would end up following him and becoming Franciscans. Friendship was actually really, really important to St. Francis.
Did St. Francis finish rebuilding the church he was fixing?
Yes, he did actually, but he ended up having some help doing it.
How many Franciscans are there?
Oh, today? Well, I know by the time Francis died, there was about 5,000 of them. Today, don't know the exact number, but I think, because part of the problem is there are different kinds of Franciscans, and
5,000 Franciscan orders.
yeah, so I think if you put out all of the Franciscan families together, you're probably looking at 20 or 25,000 people worldwide.
Did St. Francis have any brothers and sisters? Did he get married and have children?
Yes, he did have siblings, I forget how many. No, he never got married.
Why did St. Francis get the stigmata?
It was a sign actually of his commitment to Christ that was so profound that I think God marked him in that way.
What did St. Francis's mom and friends think about how he changed his life?
At first, they all thought he was a little nuts, if I'm going to be really honest. And his mother eventually came to accept it. Some of his friends did. And matter of fact, as I said earlier, some of his friends accepted it so much that they actually followed him and became Franciscans themselves. Others actually stopped having anything to do with him because they couldn't understand why he had changed his life so radically. And others just remained as friends as they were before.
At what age did St. Francis become a deacon?
I believe he was 24, but I'm not 100% sure.
Was he ever a priest?
No, he was not.
How did St. Francis die?
He got sick, and they're not exactly sure what the illness was. He just got ill. And back then they didn't have the medical knowledge we do today. So he got sick of something, and he died.
Why is St. Francis the patron saint of animals?
Because there's a lot of stories around him dealing with animals where one day he was preaching and the birds came and listened to his preaching. There's another story of a person who wanted to bring a donkey into the church and the priest didn't want him to do that, and Francis made it possible for him to bring the donkey into the church. He just had this really friendly attitude towards animals.
Why didn't Jesus tell people he was the Son of God when he was younger?
I think for Jesus, it was a question of, because remember, he's still a human being like us. And so he had to grow an understanding of what that exactly meant. You know, though he was fully God, the human side of him have all the knowledge. And so he had to grow, as the Gospels tell us, he grew in wisdom. And so my guess is he didn't know how to talk about it when he was younger. He had to sort of figure it all out.
Why were the people at the synagogue angry with Jesus?
Which time? That happened actually quite a bit with Jesus. The many times that he got angry was because basically Jesus did something that generally got people upset in pretty much every circumstance, which was he challenged them. Jesus basically let people know they weren't living their lives the way they were supposed to, and that there was really only one way to live your life correctly, and that was following God's will. And that the way they were interpreting that was wrong. For Jesus, there was only one way to get to the truth, and there was only one truth. And people don't usually like that. They want to know that the way they look at the world is just as good as you look at the world. And Jesus was very clear that that's not how it works. There's only one right way to look at the world, and that's God's way. And when Jesus was telling people that they were wrong, they didn't like it.
How did Jesus know who would want to follow him when choosing his apostles?
Well, though he was fully human like us, and many saints actually had this ability too, like St. John Vianney, St. Padre Pio, could read people's hearts. So Jesus had the ability to read people's hearts and know that they would be open to where he was calling them to.
Who are some more well-known saints besides St. Francis?
Oh, there's a lot of, well, of course there's the Blessed Mother, but we can St. Peter, all the apostles. For me, some of my favorite saints that are famous are St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Augustine, St. Clare, who is a follower of St. Francis. In fact, I celebrate Mass at the Poor Clares in Andover once a month. That's the order that St. Clare founded. St. Alphonsus Liguori. There's lots and lots of them.
Why would someone become a deacon versus becoming a priest?
Well, they're different callings, and it really comes down to what God is calling, which sort of order God is calling you to be. One is not better than the other, and I really do believe that. It really is more about how God wants you to serve the church. And if you're not called to be either, maybe you're just called to be living the married life. Well, that's a really great thing. And it's not that the priesthood or the diaconate is better than living in the married life. It's just a different way of serving the Lord. And that's really what it comes down to. It's never a question of what you want to do. When it's coming to understand the vocation God is calling us to, it's always a question of what God wants you to do, and then your responsibility is to understand what it is God is calling you to do and do just that.
When was the first church made? When was the first Bible made?
I can't say with definitive statement when the first church was built, but believe it or not, down in New Haven, Connecticut, in the University of Yale, in their museum, they have a church that was built in Syria, from a place called Doria Europa in Syria, and they think that is the oldest church that is intact. What they did was they actually took it apart piece by piece and brought it back to Yale and reassembled it at Yale, and that was built somewhere in the 3rd century. And it was a house church. So the reason we don't know where the earliest ones might have been was because all of the earliest churches would have been what we call house churches. In other words, someone's house was converted into a church, and that's where they would originally celebrate the sacraments. Only over time, and a big part of this was because Christianity was illegal, and so they couldn't build churches. And so it would only be over time, when Christianity became legal, that they were able to start building churches.
What was the first Bible made?
Well, for the Old Testament, a few thousand years ago, the first writing for the New Testament, putting all of the books together of what we would call the New Testament, probably happened, and again, this is a guess on my part, probably in the mid-2nd century is when they started actually putting the books together and to make what we would call the New Testament.
Can you ever stop being a priest? Would you?
Can I ever stop being a priest? Technically, no, because it's what's called a character sacrament, which means God actually changes my soul, so that my soul, like at baptism and confirmation, your soul is actually marked by God, which is why we only baptize and confirm once. So once baptized, always baptized, once confirmed, always confirmed. The same is true with holy orders. So once you're ordained a deacon, and then once you're ordained a priest, your soul is permanently marked by that. And so you can't ever stop being that. You can stop acting as a priest. So I technically could leave the church and not act as a priest, but I would still be one. That can never change. Would I ever do that? No. I love being a priest. It's the best life in the whole world.
How many saints are there?
Well, there are two ways of answering that question again, because we had a similar question last time. It's whether it's a big S or a small s. Small s saints, which is anyone who's in heaven is a saint. That's the whole point. We all should be striving to become saints, because that's what it means to be in heaven. And for the large S saints, the saints who have actually been canonized, who have been made a saint, I think it's something around 20,000 right now. I don't know, because unfortunately the last few popes have made a lot of saints, so I don't know what the exact number is now, but I think it's around 20,000 that have been canonized.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And in December, we will be hosting Facts with Father live. So if you would like to come and ask questions on Zoom, Father, we'd love to see you there.
Awesome. It would be great to have you with me. God bless.